My husband's Apple Watch told me everything. Not through a text. Through a heart rate spike. Every Friday at 2 p.m. For 8 months. While he was supposedly in back-to-back meetings. Tonight every single story is about the exact object, the exact accident, the exact moment that ended a marriage. 5 discoveries. 5 lives changed forever. Stay until the end, because story 5 involves something that has never happened to anyone I have talked to before. Let me take you back to where each of these stories started. My name is Vanessa. I am 37 years old. I live in Dallas, Texas, and 9 months ago I discovered my husband's affair through his Apple Watch health data, which I accessed through our shared family health app while trying to understand why he had recently mentioned feeling unusually fatigued, discovering a pattern of significant, sustained heart rate elevation occurring every single Friday afternoon at almost exactly 2 o'clock, lasting approximately 90 minutes. A pattern completely inconsistent with the sedentary back-to-back meetings he had always described as his typical Friday afternoon schedule. My husband's name is Gregory, and we had been married for 11 years, and I want to describe the specific process of this discovery, because I had genuinely been checking his health data out of caring concern rather than any suspicion. Having noticed him mentioning unusual tiredness over recent weeks and wanting to understand whether his sleep patterns or activity levels might explain what he was experiencing, I want to describe what I actually found when I opened this shared health tracking app. A consistent, unmistakable pattern spanning 8 months, every Friday, heart rate elevating significantly above his normal resting baseline beginning almost precisely at 2 o'clock, remaining elevated for roughly 90 minutes before gradually returning to normal levels, a pattern that, once I noticed it, appeared with a consistency that felt impossible to attribute to any random coincidence or ordinary workplace stress that might occasionally spike on any given Friday. I want to describe the specific moment I understood what this pattern most likely represented, cross-referencing these Friday afternoon spikes against Gregory's actual described schedule, finding that he had consistently told me these hours were occupied by mandatory department meetings, a claim that felt increasingly implausible once I considered what kind of sustained physical activity, rather than simply stressful conversation, would actually produce this specific pattern of elevated heart rate for a full 90-minute period. I want to describe what I did once I recognized this pattern, spending several additional weeks gathering more context before confronting Gregory directly, checking through his employer's general office communications that I had access to through my own connection to several of his colleagues' spouses, whether these Friday meetings he described actually appeared on any shared department calendar, discovering no evidence of any recurring Friday afternoon meeting matching what he had been telling me for months. I confronted Gregory with both the Apple Watch data and this additional context, watching him move through initial confused denial before the specificity and consistency of 8 months of data made continued deception genuinely difficult to sustain credibly. Update. 4 months later. Gregory's affair, once fully acknowledged, had been ongoing for exactly the 8 months the health data reflected, conducted with a woman he had met through a professional association, their Friday meetings occurring at a hotel near his office during what he had specifically arranged to appear, to me, as unavoidable work commitments. I filed for divorce within the following weeks, finding the specific mechanism of this discovery: his own body's data, essentially documenting the affair in real time without his awareness that I had access to this information, particularly difficult to move past given how completely unaware he apparently remained that this technology was silently recording exactly the kind of pattern that would eventually reveal everything. Our divorce was finalized 2 months ago, and I have found myself reflecting often on the strange, modern irony of this discovery, understanding that Gregory had apparently taken considerable care to avoid more traditional detection methods, careful about phone messages and financial records, while remaining completely unaware that a device designed simply to track his health had been documenting an unmistakable, consistent pattern the entire time. Gregory's own watch documented everything he thought was hidden, and just like Vanessa found, her answer in health data, The woman in story 2 found hers in something that seemed completely unrelated at first. A car's own memory. Wait, this is the part that gets me most. Here is what she found. My name is Samantha. I am 34 years old. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, and 8 months ago I discovered my husband's affair when our shared family vehicle's Bluetooth infotainment system automatically connected to an unfamiliar phone the moment I started the car for a routine grocery run, displaying a contact name and recent call history I had never seen before, revealing, once I understood what I was looking at, that this unfamiliar device had apparently been regularly connected to our car system for a significant period, meaning someone had been riding in our family vehicle on a consistent basis without my knowledge. My husband's name is Ryan, and we had been married for 9 years, and I want to describe the specific moment of this discovery, starting our car for what I expected to be an entirely ordinary errand, watching the dashboard display automatically populate with an unfamiliar name and a recent call log clearly belonging to someone else's phone, information the system had apparently retained from a previous connection that had occurred recently enough to still be actively stored and automatically syncing. I want to describe what I did once I understood this represented something significant, using our car system menu to review the complete list of previously connected devices, discovering not simply this one unfamiliar phone but a pattern of regular connections spanning several months, always occurring during hours when Ryan had told me he was using the car alone for various errands or work-related driving, a pattern that made clear this unfamiliar phone's owner had been a regular passenger in our vehicle during exactly the periods Ryan claimed to be alone. I want to describe the process of identifying who this phone actually belonged to, finding, through the specific contact name displayed and some careful additional research, that it connected to a woman named Jessica who worked at the same company as Ryan, someone I had met briefly at a company holiday party, but had no reason to suspect held any particular significance in Ryan's life beyond ordinary professional acquaintance. I want to describe the confrontation that followed once I had documented this pattern of regular vehicle connections, presenting Ryan with the specific dates and connection history I had compiled from our car's own system, watching him move through initial attempts to minimize this as simply occasional carpooling with a coworker before the actual frequency and timing of these connections, occurring during specific periods he had consistently described as solo driving time, made this explanation impossible to sustain credibly. Update. 4 months later. Ryan's affair with Jessica, once fully acknowledged, had been ongoing for approximately 6 months, and I filed for divorce within the following weeks once the complete scope of this deception became clear. Our divorce proceedings have been relatively straightforward, though I have found myself in the months since developing what my therapist has described as a reasonable heightened attention to the various small pieces of digital evidence our modern, connected devices constantly generate, understanding that Ryan's affair, like so many others I have since read about, was ultimately revealed not through any dramatic confrontation but through the quiet automatic documentation our own technology maintains regardless of our awareness or intentions. Ryan never considered that a car remembers. Our third story tonight is about a discovery that came through something far more personal, a shared streaming account, and a single episode that revealed everything. This is the part that stays with me. Here is what happened. My name is Nicole. I am 32 years old. I live in Denver, Colorado, and 7 months ago I discovered my husband's affair through our shared streaming service account, noticing, while browsing our family's viewing history to find a show recommendation, that his individual profile showed consistent viewing activity during weekday afternoons when he had always told me he was at work. Specific timestamps that made clear someone using his profile had been watching entire episodes of shows during hours he claimed to be professionally occupied and unavailable for any personal streaming. My husband's name is Brian and we had been married for 6 years, and I want to describe the specific pattern that caught my attention, noticing several shows marked as recently watched on his profile, with the streaming service's own activity log showing specific viewing times that consistently fell during Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, hours Brian had always described as containing his most demanding, meeting-heavy work schedule. I want to describe what I did once I noticed this inconsistency, initially assuming perhaps Brian had simply started streaming something during a work break, a relatively innocent explanation that became harder to sustain once I noticed the pattern's specific consistency, always the same 2 days, always during the same general afternoon window, with viewing sessions long enough to suggest someone had watched multiple consecutive episodes rather than simply a brief break. I want to describe my subsequent investigation, checking the specific device information the streaming service tracked alongside this viewing activity, discovering that these sessions had occurred not on Brian's own phone or work computer, but on a device I did not recognize at all, suggesting someone else entirely might be using his account credentials during these specific hours. I confronted Brian with this streaming history, and his explanation, once he understood the specificity of what I had discovered, revealed a situation more complicated than simple account sharing, eventually acknowledging that he had indeed been spending these Tuesday and Thursday afternoons with another woman, watching shows together during what should have been his working hours, a detail that revealed not just infidelity but also significant, sustained deception regarding his actual professional attendance during these periods. Update 4 months later. Brian's affair, once fully revealed, had been ongoing for approximately 5 months, and the streaming pattern I discovered turned out to represent only one small piece of a considerably larger deception that included him actually leaving work early on these specific days, a fact his employer, once I anonymously raised concerns given the potential workplace policy violations involved, was already independently investigating through unrelated attendance monitoring. I filed for divorce shortly after this discovery, and I have found myself explaining to several friends the almost absurd, mundane nature of how this affair was ultimately revealed, not through any dramatic confrontation but through a streaming service's routine activity tracking, a detail that still strikes me as one of the stranger aspects of how modern infidelity apparently gets discovered in an era where so many of our daily activities leave some kind of digital trace behind. Brian's streaming habits gave away 5 months. Our fourth story tonight is about a discovery that happened through something far more physical, a single strand of hair found in a place that had no reason to be. Wait, let that sink in. Here is what happened. My name is Kevin. I am 41 years old. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and 6 months ago I discovered my wife's affair after finding a long strand of dark hair in our guest bathroom sink, a detail I noticed only because both my wife and I have distinctly different hair, mine short and hers a lighter shade, making this specific dark, considerably longer hair immediately stand out as belonging to neither of us. Discovered during a period when my wife had told me our guest bathroom had not been used by anyone in weeks. My wife's name is Laura, and we had been married for 13 years, and I want to describe the specific moment I noticed this detail, cleaning our guest bathroom as part of routine household maintenance, finding this single, distinctly different hair strand in a sink that Laura had specifically told me remained unused since our last actual houseguests had departed nearly a month earlier. I want to describe what I did with this initial observation, mentioning it casually to Laura that same evening, watching her reaction shift subtly toward what felt like disproportionate defensiveness for what should have been an entirely mundane household detail, an over-explanation about possibly forgetting some brief use of that bathroom that felt, even in the moment, somewhat inconsistent with how confidently she had previously stated no one had used that space in weeks. I want to describe the process of paying closer attention following this initial uncomfortable interaction, beginning to notice additional small inconsistencies I had not previously considered significant, unexplained afternoon absences Laura attributed to errands that seemed to take longer than reasonable, and a general pattern of increased phone privacy that, combined with this initial hair discovery, began building toward a level of concern I felt required more direct investigation. I want to describe the confrontation that eventually followed several weeks of this heightened attention, during which I discovered, through more careful monitoring of Laura's actual schedule against what she reported to me, clear evidence that she had been meeting someone regularly during what she described as her volunteer commitments, meetings that, once I finally confronted her directly with the accumulated pattern of evidence, she acknowledged represented an ongoing affair with someone she had met through this same volunteer organization. Update 4 months later. Laura's affair, once fully acknowledged, had been ongoing for approximately 4 months, apparently including at least one occasion when her affair partner had actually visited our home during a period I was traveling for work, explaining the hair I had originally discovered in our supposedly unused guest bathroom. I filed for divorce following this confrontation, and I have found myself reflecting frequently on how close this entire situation came to remaining undiscovered, understanding that had I simply cleaned that bathroom without noticing this single, small physical detail, or had I dismissed it as easily explainable rather than paying attention to my own instinctive sense that something did not fully add up, this affair might have continued considerably longer before any other evidence eventually surfaced. Kevin noticed one strand of hair that changed everything. Our final story tonight, Story 5, is about a discovery that I promised you at the very beginning, because this one has never happened to anyone else I have researched. A discovery made through a smart doorbell belonging to someone else entirely. This is the last story. Here is what happened. My name is Elizabeth. I am 39 years old. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and 5 months ago I discovered my husband's affair when a neighbor, showing me footage from her own smart doorbell camera to complain about a package theft issue affecting our street, inadvertently included clips that showed my husband's car parked at a house 3 doors down from ours on multiple occasions over recent weeks, visits occurring during hours he had consistently told me he was traveling for work. My husband's name is Thomas, and we had been married for 15 years, and I want to describe the specific circumstances of this discovery. My neighbor Karen showing me footage from her doorbell camera specifically to discuss a suspicious person she had noticed near several mailboxes on our street, footage that happened to also capture, in its wider field of view, activity occurring at a house further down the street, activity that included, across several different clips spanning multiple weeks, my husband's distinctive vehicle arriving and remaining parked for extended periods. I want to describe the specific moment I recognized what I was actually seeing. Watching Karen's footage primarily focused on package theft concerns, my attention drawn instead to my own husband's car appearing repeatedly in the background of these clips, parked outside a house belonging to a woman I recognized only vaguely as another neighbor. Someone I had exchanged occasional pleasant greetings with but had no reason to suspect held any particular significance to Thomas. I want to describe what I did once I recognized this pattern, asking Karen, as casually as I could manage while processing genuine shock, whether her camera system retained older footage I might be able to review further, learning that yes, her system maintained a rolling 30-day history that would allow me to see a more complete picture of exactly how frequently and for how long this pattern had actually been occurring. Update 4 months later. Reviewing this extended footage revealed that Thomas had been visiting this neighbor's house regularly for at least the entire 30-day period the camera retained, and further investigation, once I confronted him with this footage, revealed the actual affair had been ongoing for approximately 7 months, conducted with remarkable proximity given that this represented literally a neighbor living just 3 houses away from our own home. I filed for divorce shortly after this discovery, and the specific, almost impossible irony of learning about this affair through a neighbor's doorbell camera, meant originally to address an unrelated package theft concern, remains one of the most surreal aspects of this entire experience. Understanding that Thomas had apparently believed the physical proximity itself provided some form of protection against discovery, never considering that our neighborhood's own increasing use of home security technology would eventually document exactly the pattern that ultimately revealed everything. That's all 5 stories tonight. If any of these hit close to home, let me know in the comments below. If you want more stories like this, Every single day, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. A like helps YouTube show this to more people who might need to hear. Tonight, tomorrow's video has a story that might be the most shocking one yet. So make sure you're subscribed. Thank you for watching.